Hey, thanks for joining us in the Vibrant Life podcast. This is the official podcast of the Vibrant Life community. I'm Sarah Nolan, and I'm an energetic management and a burnout prevention consultant. And I'm here with Molly McGrath. Molly is in my local mastermind here in Denver, Colorado, and she is a consultant for attorneys and she's amazing. She is one of the most knowledgeable and wise business owners that I have ever met. She goes so deep in her level of wisdom that it's almost like a philosophy for her. And it's just an honor to have Molly on the podcast with us today. So thank you so much for joining us, Molly.
Oh, Sarah, thank you for having me here. I'm honored. So excited.
Yeah. So this episode is about, and we're doing a whole series with these interviews about overcoming a major challenge and what mental shifts people have made and how they became different in the process. And Molly has a really amazing and inspirational story that I think is going to resonate with you guys, everybody who's watching and listening, really about stepping out and overcoming those doubts and all of the garbage that comes up in the process of stepping out. So Molly, can you share your story a little bit, like where you came from and your journey along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the co-founder of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. We are a business that is dedicated, like Sarah said, by and large for small solo attorneys. We fell into the industry about 20 years ago. We do work with other small solos, entrepreneurs and solopreneurs as well, but that's the bread and butter of our business. And we hung our shingle, if you will, in 2008, my partner Lainey and we really just built a business out of a place of passion. It was never about money. We had no idea what we were doing. For the most part, people would say to us, the big portion of our business was hiring. So can you help us with hiring? So we started that division of our arm, which very quickly turned into the coaching and consulting side. So we had very little capital when we started our business. And through that, we just started talking to everyone that we knew, and all of our business was 100% referral based. And from there, we got invited to speak at national events, and we were on stages all over the country for different legal organizations. And that was my least favorite part. My partner is very, very dynamic. She didn't like the one-on-one at all. I love the one-on-one. I lead in relationship, and that's really my sweet spot and my unique ability. And she really loved the stage side. I did not love the stage side at all. Manipulating and maneuvering PowerPoints and notes and staying on an agenda and handing out tools, very rigid, was not my unique ability at all. And I've heard it said so many times that people fear their two greatest fears are public speaking and death. And that was for certain one of mine. I always was the person in the backstage, if you will, where I worked prior to starting our own business, I worked for many founders of organizations, C-level executives, etc. And I was always their right-hand person, and they were the person on stage. And so from there, I really realized that was one of my greatest limiting beliefs, was being upfront and out front and being seen and being heard.
Yeah, that's so common for people like you who have a really powerful message. And I can definitely relate to that too, where it's almost like it's so powerful that what are people going to say when they hear it? And sometimes it's like it's very different and all that stuff just comes up. So what specifically kinds of feelings and experiences would come up for you when you started stepping out on your own and in sharing your voice?
Well, Sarah, before we started recording today, you and I kind of had a chat and we were talking about that. And I had shared with you, I remember we had written a book, and that I know it sounds crazy, but it was super easy for us to do. We hired a publisher, we had an editor. That was probably when we started investing some serious capital into our book. And it wasn't necessarily to generate revenue, make a ton of book sales. It was to leverage our time and our message and to get it out there, because we found ourselves repeating ourselves over and over again. And so the feeling that came out for me when we published that book, very quickly it hit Amazon #1 bestsellers, mover and shaker. And I think that was back in maybe 2010 when we wrote our first book.
Yeah.
And then from there, I got invited to be a contributing author in several other books. And even that second book that I got invited to be a contributing author in, Speaking Your Truth, Stories of Courageous Women, I would never share it with anyone. The feelings that came up for me was, I was raised in a very humble, modest family, and you never ever, it was just ingrained in my head, you never brag about yourself. You absolutely put others before you. You show up always humble. And that was such a roadblock for me and a limiting belief that the first feeling I think of sharing, oh my goodness, I published this book, I have a blog that I've been blogging, all this fantastic stuff that I was doing, was the first thing that came up was fear, like that I was going to be showing up like I was bragging, or that I was, better than anybody else. And the second thing that came up for me was imposter syndrome. Like, who are you to think that you can write a book and you can do all this when you dropped out of college and didn't even graduate from college? Like, who do you think you are? You're a fraud. So it was a lot of that came up for me, was just that the imposter syndrome, fear of being very, very boastful. And then I'd say a third thing was fear of the critics, that people were going to just get in there and just rip it apart and find every single thing wrong with it. And so it was really just being out there. The second you hit publish or you put something out there, that's when all the vultures come out, if you will, and just to attack either the knowledge that you're putting out there, to attack your character, your opinion, whatever it might be. So those were the top 3 limiting beliefs that I had.
Oh my gosh, I can just imagine. I'm working on a book myself right now, and I'm like projecting into the future for like when I actually publish it. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. Like all of the stuff. And I've had that with some videos and things like that. And it's definitely not a pleasant experience. So well, first of all, did you experience any of that? Like, did any of those fears actually come true for you?
No. Now that you say that, I'm thinking, no, people were very, very supportive of me. It's interesting that you say that, because I didn't have the critic or any of the people just trying to tear me down at all. Nobody ever called me boastful. It's not even in my energy or makeup. And I've really finally got that. Like, that's in my bones. I know that that's not even who I am. And I'm really grateful for that. I think the thing that I noticed was that there wasn't that, but there also wasn't a tremendous amount of celebration, if you will, or acknowledgement from, by and large, like my family members and or people closest to me, my clients, my prospective clients, my referral sources, people like you in my mastermind class were my greatest supporters, because they fully, wholly understand what it takes to be an entrepreneur and what goes into content creation and all the blood, sweat, tears, emotions, everything time that goes into birthing something like that. So I didn't have the critic at all. So the thing that shifted from me after that was like, okay, there was no truth in that. There's no evidence. That didn't happen. Now I had to work on not giving any truth, that there wasn't a tremendous amount of acknowledgement and celebration from my family and friends that are, from where I grew up and all that. and really not giving that any weight and not making it any truth or validity, that it doesn't mean that it's garbage and that it's not relevant. But I had to really shift of where I go to get my acknowledgement and praise, if you will, because I was getting it from my clients. Absolutely. My phone's ringing off the hook. People are commenting on our blog. We start getting speaking engagements everywhere, things of that nature. Like I said, additional book deals for people having us a contributing author. But there was a piece of me that was like, yeah, that's great. Like, these are my business people. Of course, I know I'm an expert. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Right. But I still had this piece in my mind of like, oh, well, I'm not getting the acknowledgement from my friends and family.
Yeah. So that must have felt kind of rough in the beginning. And then what, you said you kind of worked through that, like just not giving too much weight to the opinions of your family and friends.
Yeah, I really did. I tried to just put myself into their perspective of a few things. Number one, I just automatically know that my family and my friends do support me.
So there's a certain element of like faith and like just self-confidence that you have to be able to just know and not need that validation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I feel like I hear so many celebrities who are miserable because nothing they do is good enough. I was just reading about, oh my gosh, who was it? I can't remember, but like Robin Williams was a really big one, where he was so big around the world, but he still had really low confidence and he wasn't able to have that mental and emotional stability within himself to be able to, see the reality of his talent and of his performance and just be solid within his knowing of his own worth. So what are some things that helped you to overcome some of those fears and some of the emotional challenges that come up whenever you're stepping out into new levels of, publishing a book and then speaking and things like that?
Yeah, I love that you use that example of Robin Williams, if you will, or celebrities or what have you, because all the money that they have, I'm always just blown away by, and this my like dying question. I know you and I had a conversation about this last week in our mastermind about, did they not surround themselves with coaches and mentors that people really help them to manage their mental and emotional state? I'm sure they have all these acting coaches and people that make them look beautiful on camera and all the other pieces from the exterior. But as you were saying that, I think the biggest piece for me, I was very fortunate in 1997 when I stepped into the legal space that my first job was to be a practice advisor for a coach. And coaching wasn't even a street term back then. And I have had a coach ever since then. And the reason was because the first time I experienced coaching and had the courage to kind of share some of the head trash that I had, some of the things that were holding me back or that, kept me ruminating and up at night. They always say the truth will set you free. And like, I know that I've never ever believed in that statement as much as I do now, because the second I call it like, you can puke it out and you have someone who's going to hold the puke bucket for you, so to speak. And then from there, once you get it out, then you can clean it up. Or another analogy I use, it's almost like dumping the junk drawer on the kitchen table and then being able to organize and sort it. So I always had a coach before I even launched any piece of content, whether it be my blog, my books, my podcast, or what have you. And each time that I level up, I hit a different, they call it the terror barrier. I hit another one where I'm like, damn it, I thought I was done with this. Like, and you hit another one. And now I'm really learning to embrace it and expect it and know that it's a different level of, I used to always say, oh my God, I'm having a breakdown or I'm having a meltdown. And it's like, no, you're shedding and you're unbecoming the limiting beliefs that you've been carrying on for you. So for the biggest piece for me has always been having a coach. And you can have a coach, right? And then, like I always say, and expect to have that Oprah moment, if you will. You get on the call and they make you feel better and then you walk away. If that's the experience that you have with a coach, a therapist, whoever you're working with the wrong person.
Right. Yeah.
Because most parts, and you and I have talked about that when we've done business alignment sessions that you've facilitated for me. And afterwards, the next day you'll check in with me. You're like, how you doing? I'm like, oh my God, you've rocked my world. I'm a disaster. But I know it and I giggle about it now. But I showed up and did the work. I showed up and I was truthful and honest with, my confidence is rocked. I'm procrastinating on things. I always come up with a list of, my truths of what I'm dealing with, because I can't expect them to do all the work for me. They're just a vessel. They're just a container to hold space for you.
Yeah. And that's such a good point that you brought up, Molly, about showing up in truth, like just being totally honest and just dumping everything out so that this other person can see exactly, okay, what exactly is in this junk drawer right now, and what needs to be here, what needs to go in the trash, what needs to go in a different drawer. And there's no use hiding anything, because that's, it may be easier to hide something because it's, hard to talk about. Some of my best coaches, I'm like in tears by the end of the call.
Yeah.
They just say they like have this ability to pick something out, and it's so spot on, and nobody has ever said it in that way that it's just like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, I actually had a client who said that to me. So a firm that I've been coaching for many, many years, and they said, I have to tell you, my team member says she gets complete anxiety before each one of our coaching calls, and she actually hates our coaching calls. And he said to me, is it okay if she doesn't come on anymore? Because I'm like, well, if she wants to keep hiding out and keep burying her head in the sand and not really do the work that it causes for her to have, the dreams that she wants and what she wants in her life, that's fine. The job of the coach is to shine the spotlight on where you're hiding out, where your blind spots are, and hold your feet to your dreams, most often in spite of yourself. So so often when they're always like, I feel like I'm going to the principal's office. I'm like, good. That's the experience it should be.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. A good coach is not going to be a cheerleader. No. That's like, your friends are your cheerleaders. And that's why it's not always helpful to go to your friends when you're in trouble, because, they'll make you feel better. But
yes.
So I know we had talked about energy work, like what kinds of shifts have you said you've done a lot of coaching, and how has the energy work helped you to, bring the coaching to a different level? Like why? So first of all, how did you even get into energy work? Because I know a lot of people listening might be, very new to it. And then how did you make that part of your like regular practice or your regular routine?
How I got into energy work was, my oldest son is 17 now, and I think he was probably 3. A neighbor of mine were doing a 3-day breast cancer walk up in the mountains, and we would meet every morning at 5 a.m. and train and walk. We were walking something like 36 miles and in elevation in the mountains. And
how long did that take you? 36 miles?
Yeah. I think it took us 3 days, 2.5 days, 3 days. Yeah, it was awesome. I actually did it 3 years in a row.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. but we were walking, and so her and I were talking, and I was really stuck in so many areas. I had a job. I didn't even own a business back then, so I was a partner in another business, a major or minority partner, with a very narcissistic business partner, which I didn't even know that term at that time, and I didn't know it. I was in conflict of, in a very a marriage that I was not happy in. And we were walking, and she said, I really think that and I could feel her kind of like dancing around this subject. And she goes, I work with this lady, and she's talking to me, and explaining the experiences and the results that she had had. And she gave me her number and said it's basically energy healing. It's Reiki. I had no idea what that was at the time. And she was sharing her experiences. And typically somebody will give me their card of, any type of resource that they have or referral for whatever you're talking about, and I'll throw it on my desk. And I walked into the house at 7:30 in the morning and picked up the phone and called Colette, which was the name of the practitioner that I was working with at the time. And it completely transformed my life. So like I said, that was, 14 years ago. And for me, what it did was it was very different than coaching. So I've always had a coach, and I will always have a coach until the day I die, from a place of a life coach. Then I have a business coach. And then I work on kind of my emotional, spiritual energy coach as well. It's the best money that I spend any single month. I will go and live off of ramen if it ever came down to it, versus pulling that from my P&L.
And the coaching is going to help you. If you ever got to that spot, the coaching would help you get out of it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, for me, it was just about learning how to tune in. You always hear this mind-body connection and all that stuff. And it seems a little woo-woo sometimes and very difficult to understand. But for me, I didn't realize how much energy I was holding in my body for multiple reasons. I wasn't expressing it, or I wasn't connecting with it, and intentionally and consciously expressing it to get it out of my body. But then also I wasn't paying attention to where it was stuck and it was lodged up. And then I also learned about the chakras and all that. It's transformed my life of really just being able to tune into your body and your breath, and then being able to feel like when you're ready to get on stage and you're ready to do something really big and be out there and be vulnerable, just even something as simple as saying, where do you feel that in your body?
Right.
For me, it was in my jaw and my shoulders was where I was holding my stress, to the point where I was breaking night guards at night, like just completely breaking them in half. And I had severe TMJ, and Reiki has healed that for me.
Amazing. Amazing. And I love that you brought up the speaking with energy work too, because I can imagine, and I've done some speaking myself too, and with writing, when you're doing energy work, it's like you can tap into this higher power, this higher level of consciousness. And did you find that just by doing regular energy work, you've been able to tap into that higher consciousness to produce the content that you've been creating?
Yes, absolutely. I was at a women's conference this weekend with one of my very dear friends who was a business partner in another relationship that we got out of with that narcissist. She was part of it. And it was interesting because she said to me, she also is doing Reiki and very much spends a tremendous amount of money and time and energy on energy healing. And we were at dinner one night, and she goes, did you notice that I'm not sick? And I go, oh my God, you're right. She goes, I haven't had a sinus infection since our last speaking event that we
Wow.
did at our last business. And every single time we would do these quarterly retreats, she
Mhm.
would show up with a massive sinus infection. I'm not even
Wow.
kidding you. She hasn't been sick since. I would show up and I couldn't even talk.
Mhm.
We went back and looked at our past two events where I got sick. One, I completely lost my voice, but I couldn't even have words come out of my mouth. And if they did, I would get so emotional because
Mhm.
that's how much trauma I had and fear I had stuck in my body. And part of it was the surrounding being on stage with someone who was not very supportive of me, number
Right.
one. Number two, the second piece that I would say is I went back and read even all of my blogs from 2008 when we started blogging. And every once in a while, when I pull out a chapter of our first book, I'm like, oh my goodness,
Mhm.
I can feel my stuck energy
Mhm.
and really how angry and resentful I was in some of this writing. And so, to your question, yes, I very much come from such a higher place. Like when I look at something that I've written in the past prior to doing energy work and really being conscious and spending a tremendous amount of time of grounding myself
Mhm.
before I speak, talk, write, what have you, and doing some of the practices that you've given me through the business alignment, through the energy work. If I don't ground myself before that and get all of my, emotional crap out of me and really get conscious about and coming from a higher place and making certain that anything I'm saying or doing, it's not about me. It's about making impact and service and difference for the reader.
Yeah, that's something that I have never heard other people talk about, which is the impact that you can make for another person based on how you're showing up.
Mm,
A lot of people feel like it's selfish to spend hundreds or thousands per month on energy healing, but that might possibly be or energy healing or anything else, anything that
right.
you're going to invest in yourself. It's not just about ourselves. Like, think about the readers who have been following you all these years and how they're able to elevate as you're elevating yourself, and how this energy is just rubbing off on you.
I
I'm
can't
sorry,
tell
rubbing
you.
off on
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many people who have actually commented on
Mm.
that to me. Even right down to my kids' impact. Like for a long time, I did feel selfish because I was always raised, my family, you saved your money.
Hmm.
My parents died with their communion money under their mattress still,
Oh
like
my gosh.
you don't spend money on yourself. And if you do, everything's for the kids. Everything's
Hmm.
for the kids. And it wasn't until I started doing this Reiki and energy work, Sarah, that I was starting to get direct feedback from my kids. And I started to be more conscious when they would do certain things, or even my clients. I'm like, whoa, there was a day when I reacted like this,
Hmm.
and now I'm responding like this.
Right,
I'm
right.
not even reacting. And I'm really, kind of pausing before I
Hmm.
say or do anything.
Amazing. I love it. So coming back to the public speaking thing and like really putting yourself out there, what are some of the changes that you have seen currently as a result of this journey that you've had, where you have been doing coaching and energy work and just really working with the beliefs? Like, how has that stuff worked for you? And where are you right now in regards to putting yourself out there and your beliefs and all that?
Wow. Um, my journey, goodness, I think I started speaking in 2000 was the first time I was on
Hmm.
stage, and it was horrible. It was awful. And for a long time it was. And I think I told you earlier, it's been about probably 2 years that I've really nothing. I have
Hmm.
no anxiety, no anything anymore
Really?
about speaking. Zero. zero, zero, zero. And I'll tell you what I think the biggest difference were. Number one, uh, I joined Toastmasters a long time ago, but it was so rigid and
Mm-hmm.
scripted that I felt my anxiety getting higher and higher each week when I went there. And then it wasn't working for me. So I found this group in Denver called Speaking Circles. And actually, my coach Paula has facilitated them, founder out of Relational Presencing out of California, created this modality. And I started doing that in 2008, where it's learning how to be present and
Mm-hmm.
speak without an agenda or a script. And I was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. So I really learned how to tap into my own energy, my own content, my own truth, get rid of worrying about the agenda and the PowerPoint and performing this perfect presentation and things of that nature. And learned how to just get really clear about what my message needs to be, how to speak into the listening in a way that'll make a difference for others, completely taking me out of the equation. It's not about me looking good and what I look like or what I'm saying or anything, and learning how to just really ground and center myself before and, do an energy alignment that you've taught me, and then just showing up. And it's night and day difference between, going from a place of agendas. So what I've done is, number one, I found a place that helped me with
Right.
speaking from my soul, speaking from my spirit, and not being so stuck in my intellect. So that for me, that's Speaking Circles. That's here in Denver. Second is that I just started practicing and practicing, they say, just like riding a bike, where I would do presentations, I would do webinars, I would do some safe things that were a little bit more scripted. So starting with, just doing webinars before Zoom or anything came out, and I would just get comfortable with my voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Zoom came out, then I would start adding video to it. Then I would say, okay, I'm going to push myself and have a little fear here and do one video blog a week. And then I launched a podcast back in May. And I can tell you that was a life changer for me, because they always say practice makes perfect, or the more that you practice and just keep doing it and doing it, there's all those analogies in sports and theater and everything else. That was the biggest difference of me, because before it was like a stop start, and I'd be like, oh my God, I got to prepare for this presentation next week. I'd be all bunched up, and then I'd have it, and then I have a release, and then I'd go back in my cave, and I'm like, whew, I don't have to do that again. And then it was just this constant like stop, start, stop, start. And now that I'm like consistently doing it, between doing one video blog a week, being a guest on many people's podcasts, in addition to hosting my own podcast once a week, that has been a game changer for me, because I show up on my podcast right now. I have absolutely no agenda. I have an idea of what the theme's going to be, what the topic is, and then I just let it roll. And those are when I feel the most comfortable.
Amazing. That's amazing. Like you said, public speaking is one of the top fears that people have, and just to see how you have overcome that. And now your public speaking is one of your, biggest ways that you spend your time in your business, right? With weekly or more than weekly podcasts and things like that. So thank you so much for sharing your journey and sharing your story. And
you know what, Sarah, real quick, I want to think, it just came to me too. One other thing I could tell people, if you don't have speaking opportunities at this point, this just came to me. One thing that I started doing is having all of my sales calls or my meetings with my clients face-to-face like this on Zoom. And that's a great way to practice. So I don't want anybody who says that, well, I don't have any clients, or I don't have all these speaking opportunities, Molly and Sarah, whatever it might be. I'd say that. And the other thing I started doing is, instead of texting people anymore, I do a voice text to them. And that's helping me be really clear with my communication. And again, just being out there and hearing my voice too.
That's such a good point. And I feel like people are craving that kind of attention. Like people, it's so easy to use text with, writing, blogs or social media posts or emails versus like actually sending a voice message or a video, just like we said. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So how can people, first of all, find your book and your podcast? And is there anything else you want to share?
Sure. You can go to my website, hiringandempowering.com. And then from there, you'll see a tab where our podcast's there. You can absolutely subscribe, listen to past ones. Our blog's there. You can join our blog and you'll get a copy of our video and or written blog every single week in your inbox as well. And then our books are on there as well under the resource tab. And one thing I would love to offer to anyone that listened today, if you like what you hear or you're ready to get out front and embark on a journey in any way of hanging your own shingle and starting your own business finally, or being able to add some more pieces to it where you're doing video or podcasts or blogging or things of that nature, I would love to offer a complimentary 30-minute coaching call with anyone on the call. And on our contact page, or I think pretty much any page on my website, there's a link to my calendar, and book a 30-minute call and just put some notes in there and give me a heads up on what you want to speak about so I can prepare. And I would love to offer that to your listeners.
Beautiful. Amazing. That sounds good. And anybody who takes, or everybody who takes Molly up on that offer, I mean, that's amazing. 30 minutes to speak with you. She's going to change your life in those 30 minutes because there's going to be one nugget that she says that really speaks to you, at least out of that conversation, and you're going to walk away a different person with a different perspective. So definitely, if what we've been talking about today speaks to you and you resonate with this, this conversation, then reach out to Molly and check out her books and her podcast. She's just a wealth of information and wisdom. So thank you so much, Molly, for coming on today. It's really fun having you.
Thank you for having me. So fun.
All right, cool. Well, we will catch you guys later, and we'll talk to you soon.